What's going on, everyone? TJ here, and we're going to do a little different style video today. We're going to talk through my latest favorite form of fantasy sports, which is PGA Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy. In this video, I'm going to talk through the format and how it works, a little bit about the strategy, roster construction, things like that. And then we're going to do a review of the first round. I was fortunate enough to get 78 out of my 150 entries through to the second round. Only one of 6 advanced out of each pod, so really strong results there. And we are on to the second round and round 2 pods. But wanted to do this video for 3 reasons. Number one, I think one of the things that I want to accomplish with this channel is just talking through strategy for these types of various gambling games. And I think this is a really unique format to talk about strategy. And number 2, there's another contest for this exact format, the Scramble Returns, available in the lobby right now that starts with the Masters. So if you're interested, you can jump on into the PGA Best Ball streets immediately. And then number 3, I think this is a format that is here to stay. And this was only the second year that the contest has been run. And if I had to venture a guess, it's going to be much bigger next year. It 5x'd from year 1 to year 2. Last year was a 100K total prize pool. This year, it's a 500K total prize pool. And I would not be surprised to see it hit $1 million in the next season. So we're going to go ahead, share some screen here. As you can see now, underdogfantasy.com. I'm even rocking my Underdog t-shirt for this video. But the contest is the Scramble PGA Best Ball. And I've got a couple little slides to share too. So we're just going to break down the format and some high-level strategy points real quick. And then I'm going to jump in and share some of my current lineups and what I've got going there. All right, so Underdog PGA Best Ball. Here's the format. You draft in 6-man drafts, and each of you select 10 golfers. Each week, each tournament, the best 6 scores count out of your 10 golfers. And it's a 4-round format. In this scramble, there were 7 tournaments in each of the 4 rounds. In the first 3, you're put into pods of 6, 1 out of 6 advanced, and then in the final round, round 4, there are 261 people remaining in the final with $50,000 up top. Heading back to the Underdog site, can see the payouts here: 50 grand to first, 25 to second, 5 to 10th. Nice little payout structure there. And then one thing to note is that the scoring in this format is based strictly on scoring. How many birdies, pars, etc. are your golfers making? And finishing points do not matter at all, which is going to lead us into the second stage here, which is the contest strategy. Now, why this format in particular is extremely unique and why there's a massive edge if you know what you're doing is it's pretty counterintuitive, because the best golfers in the world are not necessarily the best golfers to pick in this type of format. Instead, we really want to focus on volume and how many tournaments your golfers are going to be playing, with the key target that you're trying to hit to have at least 6 or as close to 6 golfers playing in every tournament as possible. And looking at the second bullet, the key thing to realize is that many of the best golfers do not play in these lower profile, non-signature events. With the schedule of the PGA Tour, there are 8 signature events throughout the season. You then have the 4 majors. You have the Players' Championship. Outside of those 13 events, many of the best golfers are only playing a couple of those. So if you build a team that only has the top 10 golfers in the world, you're going to end up at some of these tournaments like the Byron Nelson, the Canadian, the Rocket Mortgage, and you're not going to have anybody playing, and you're going to score 0 fantasy points. On top of that, not only is it critical to have golfers playing in these events, but oftentimes those events are the highest fantasy points scored because they are easier courses and golfers are making a lot more birdies, right? Going back to what we said on that first slide, finishing points do not matter. All that matters is how many birdies you make and your final score to par. So think about the U.S. Open, right? The U.S. Open, sometimes the winner is only 2, 3, 4 under par. So you can have scenarios where somebody that finishes T50 at the Byron Nelson actually scores more fantasy points than whoever wins the U.S. Open. It's a little difficult to wrap your head around that, but that's the reality of how this scoring format works. And because it's so counterintuitive, it actually provides a massive edge for those of us that are understanding what the format means and drafting our teams accordingly. In this final bullet, kind of tying all of that together, the key to constructing a roster in this format is to have a combination of good golfers that are going to play the signature events, but almost more importantly, having golfers that are outside last year's FedEx Cup Top 50 and will play in these other events. Moving on, there's really 2 main types of golfers that you can select, and then there's nuance in between there. Golf is a unique format where when you're drafting, there's technically no positions, right? You think about NFL, you're drafting people at different positions. You have different roster constructions of like, oh, I'm going to take 2 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, 8 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, that type of thing. In golf, you're just picking 10 golfers, but there actually is an element of roster construction because the way I think about it is of my 10, how many signature event qualified golfers am I picking and how many non-signature event golfers am I picking? And in my drafts, I targeted having 6 signature event guys and 4 non-signature event guys, sometimes 7 and 3. But frankly, in hindsight, and after seeing some other people's teams, I actually think going 5 and 5 may have been the optimal play, which I personally did not do. And in looking at some of the other teams that I'm seeing in round 2, while I do like my strategy and I think that I'm sitting decently well, I think there are other people that played the contest better than me, and that's okay. We're going through and learning in this. But getting back to the types of golfers here, we've got 2 types. First, how the PGA Tour works is that we have the FedEx Cup standing. So all season long, based on how you perform in all of the tournaments, you earn points towards the FedEx Cup standings. At the end of each season, you have the final standings. Those people go and play in the FedEx Cup playoffs. But whoever finishes in the top 50 of the previous year's FedEx Cup standings automatically qualifies for all 8 signature events. So this is the primary bucket of golfers. They're going to play all the signature events. And then within that, I'd say you have a group of golfers that really only play those signature events and the majors. And then you have some other golfers that play significant volume in addition to that, guys like Sungjae Im as an example there. And then you have golfers outside of the top 30. Let me add a little parenthesis behind Sungjae Im because that kind of stuff drives me nuts. Typo. Anyways, then you have guys outside of the top 50. And these golfers are valuable because they are going to be battling all season to try to get into this year's signature events, to try to get into this year's FedEx Top 50 so that next year they can get in the signature events. And each signature event has, I believe, 80 golfers that are going to end up playing it, 70 to 80, depending on the tournament. And 15 golfers are able to qualify based on their current season FedEx Cup standings. This is what is the AON Next 10 and the AON Swing 5. So the Next 10 is in the current year's FedEx Cup standings. The 10 highest ranked people that aren't already in the event will get into each signature event. And then the Swing 5 is basically in between signature events. Whoever does the best in those tournaments. So currently, the last tournament that was played was the Genesis. The next signature event is the Arnold Palmer Invitational. In between that, we have the Mexico Open and the Cognizant Classic. The golfers that do the best in the Mexico plus Cognizant combined score the most FedEx Cup points. The 5 best of those will then get exempt into the Arnold Palmer Invitational, and then that will continue for each signature event and for the contests that occur in between them. And you can find FedEx Cup standing information on the PGA Tour website. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up quick here, but pgatour.com/FedEx Cup. You can see the current standings, and this is what determines the people that end up making it into the signature events. And here in the qualifications, we can see what I was just talking about, the AON Next 10, the AON Swing 5. So right now in the Next 10, you can see those golfers here. As of now, all of them will be qualified for the Arnold Palmer Invitational. However, they can still accumulate more points in the Mexico Open and Cognizant Classic, so could change accordingly. And then the AON Swing 5 is currently being determined by the in-progress Mexico Open, which is happening right now. So that's kind of the basics of how this contest works and how the format works. For me, on top of this, my big strategy that I implemented was drafting early on in the contest. On this YouTube channel, I've been doing a new podcast called Gamble, the High Stakes Game of Life. Check that out if you haven't already. But on episode 2, one of the things that we talked about was the value of being early to some of these different types of game formats. And I played the PGA contests last year, and what I noticed was that content providers came out with rankings late in the game, and those rankings heavily swayed the ADP, the average draft position. And my strategy going into this tournament was I want to get all 150 of my teams drafted before anybody comes out with rankings. As someone who felt like they had a grasp on the format relative to the field, that gave me a big advantage in the people that I was drafting against. So number one, that really helped with my advance rate because, I mean, early on, some people in my drafts were taking golfers from Live who barely even play. And it was just a less educated field that I was playing against in general. But then number two, I was able to get teams with guys that I knew were going to rise in ADP after some of the websites came out with their rankings and build teams that would not be possible to create later. So here's a quick view of my final exposures on my 150 lineups. The first thing that you'll notice is that I have 52% Eric Cole. Eric Cole is not a very good golfer, but he is kind of the epitome of this contest because while he's not a very good golfer in terms of his skill level, he is the ultimate grinder and plays like pretty much every single tournament. And as I was drafting, I was getting Eric Cole every time I wanted in the third round. I actually intentionally stopped at 50% because I didn't want to get 100% Eric Cole. I probably could have gotten 80, 90% of him if I wanted to. But I took 52% Eric Cole, again, taking him in the maybe late second, early third every time. And if we look at the final ADP, Eric Cole's final ADP was 2.5. Some of the content sites had him as the number one overall pick. And yet I was able to get 70 lineups with him in the third round. This, as I was saying, shows that value of being early. And what we'll see here, like here's my top 10 exposures and their final ADP. 52% of the guy that's 2.5, 30% basically of 4 other guys in the top 10. All of these guys I was taking way later in drafts. I knew that they were just good people to pick because they're high volume guys, but B, that their ADP would rise because I knew that these ranking systems would push them to the top. And they're, if you were drafting late in the contest, you would not be able to get a team with Eric Cole and Sung J Im both on it. Right? I mean, I've got some teams that have all 5 of these. I've got teams that have Eric Cole, Sung J Im, Tom Kim, Davis Thompson, and Ben Griffin all on the same team. 5 guys that are top 10 picks all on one roster. So, that just kind of, again, going back to this theory of being early in these different game formats. Just wanted to share that, not to brag about how great I am, but just to understand the landscape and the value in some of these new contests, and also the value of niche contests. There's just not a lot of information that gets put out on a new format like Underdog Best Ball. So, felt really good about it. Doesn't mean it's going to necessarily work out, but so far so good. We can see my teams here now. Like I said, I have 78 teams remaining out of my 150, so advanced over 50%. Now we go on to the second round. The second round is by far the most unique here. If we go to the rules for the contest, round 2 contains a lot of tournaments that are not signature events, that are not tournaments that many big names are going to play. The Mexico Open is the weakest tournament of the entire contest in terms of field strength. I'm even finding myself, I'm struggling to field teams with Mexico Open. By my estimation, I think about half of my 78 teams are pretty much dead and are not going to advance out of round 2, which is a bummer. But on the bright side, I still have 35 plus teams that I feel have a good chance to advance. So hopefully I'm able to get some moving on to round 3. But Mexico, Cognizant, API, Arnold Palmer Invitation is a signature event, but it's a very difficult course. So not a lot of fantasy scoring to be had there. The Players Championship, everybody's going to play. That's a high scoring fantasy event. And then we have the Texas Swing, which will be a combination of some guys playing 1 or 2, maybe 3 events. So getting through round 2 is going to be a tricky one. And it's going to be interesting because I think that a lot of the teams that get through round 2 might not be as strong for round 3, which has a lot of majors and signature events in it. So you can kind of see how you need a well-balanced team to get through each of the rounds. And each round, you need a little bit of a different dynamic, which is why I tried to go with that 6 and 4 roster construction to give myself balance of having both good golfers that play the signature events and the majors, and then also some of the golfers that are going to be grinding these lesser profile events. But then you come to round 4. Round 4, for anybody that plays NFL Best Ball, round 4 is the equivalent of week 16. This is where all the money is made at the end. And the big thing to note about round 4 is that there are 3 tournaments that are extremely high value, meaning a lot of birdies scored, a lot of fantasy points scored. And they are events that not many of the best golfers are going to play. You have the Canadian Open, the Rocket Mortgage, and the John Deere Classic. Having 6 golfers in any, or especially in all of those, is going to be an absolutely huge advantage in the 4th round. And one of the things that I did as I was going through drafting, I have this whole Excel sheet built out where I would, I projected out the schedules based on past schedules and what I think that people are likely to play. when it comes to projecting schedules, that's kind of a hot topic in the small industry that this is. My opinion is that it's very, very difficult to precisely predict somebody's schedule, but you can have a good idea of who's going to play what, or at least have a good idea of the types of golfers that are more likely to play some of these lesser profile events. So yeah, round 4 is really interesting. The Travelers is a signature event, is also a very, very high scoring event in terms of fantasy points, lots and lots of birdies there. And then you have the US Open, the hardest tournament all year to score fantasy points. And then we finish it overseas with the Genesis Scott and the Open Championship. So building for round 4 was certainly a priority for me. My goal with my construction is that any team that I get to the final is going to be very live to win, because it's hopefully going to have 5 or 6 guys in all of these events minimum. But who knows? It all depends on how the schedules actually shake out. And yeah, I think to kind of illustrate this a little bit more, one example, not to call this person out, but there was this guy opt out that I'm sure is very, very good underdog player. Shout out to you, opt out, if you're out there. But they decided that it was a good idea to just mass auto draft in the head-to-heads of the PGA Best Ball lobby. And they were just, yeah, like I said, auto drafting off of the ranks. And I decided to basically scoop all of their action. And I think it illustrates a bit of what I'm talking about in terms of the strategy here. Because if we look at their team versus mine, they have way better golfers, like by a mile. Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, Ludwig Aberg, Rory McIlroy, Tony Finau, Patrick Cantlay, Hideki, Akshay Bhatia, Victor Hovland, Siwoo Kim. Right? Way, like, those are the top golfers in the entire world. Me, on the other hand, I took a bunch of volume guys. So I do have Xander, top golfer, but he hasn't been playing all year. Then I got Sung Jae. I already mentioned him as a volume guy. Sahith, kind of in the Sung Jae category. My guy, Eric Cole, Tom Kim, Ben Griffin, 2 guys that are not qualified for the signature events, play a lot of volume. Davis Thompson and Max Gracerman, falling into that a similar category of guys that are in the signature events, but also play the side events. Maverick McNeely, who's been a lock for me all year, and then Aaron Rye. And if we look at how this has gone so far between the two of us, can kind of illustrate what this looks like. So for example, let's look at the Sony Open, the second tournament of the year. I had 6 golfers play in the Sony Open, was able to fill the full team. If we looked at opt-outs roster, he only had 2 golfers play. Same thing with the American Express. He only had 3 golfers play in the American Express. We look at my team, I had 6 golfers again, even with Xander withdrawing. So, yeah, and I think same thing with Waste Management Phoenix Open. I had, what, 7 guys in there. He only had 4. So I think that kind of hopefully helps illustrate this idea that it's not about picking the best golfers. It's about picking golfers that are going to play a wide range of events so that we can get 6+ guys in as many contests as possible. And that's just going to give us a huge advantage. And that's really the entire edge to be had in this contest. Yeah, so right now we're in the scramble. I went through and put how many golfers I have playing in the Mexico Open, which is currently going. And as I said, I do think that about half of my teams are drawing pretty slim and are not likely to advance, which is a bummer, but is what it is. Looking at my exposures of my remaining teams, looking at the scramble, unsurprisingly, I've got Eric Cole still remaining on half of mine. Maverick McNeely really did kill me for this week. He was slated to play the Mexico Open. He was in the field, But then after this past Sunday, he nearly won the Genesis and then woke up on Monday and withdrew from the tournament. That's one of these other funny dynamics is you want your golfers that are non-signature guys to play well, but you do not want them to win a tournament. If you win a tournament, then you become automatically qualified for all of the signature events, which will then flip their schedule on their head, and they're not going to play as many of the smaller events anymore. So ironically, even though I'm very heavy on Maverick McNeely, I was heavily anti-sweating him coming into this past weekend. So just a weird dynamic there, but it's just kind of part of the game. Yeah, so having him in 42% of my lineups and withdrawing from Mexico is killer. But we have 7 events. There's lots of golf to be played here. But that's about what we're looking at. I think that if I go back to, let's go back to some of my live contests and we can just kind of pull up some examples here. So here's my best current team remaining because I have 5 playing in the Mexico Open this week. You can see all these guys here. But as we go through the different teams, you'll see, so this guy's got 2. This guy's got 3 playing. This guy's got 3 playing. Yeah, Maverick McNeely and Keith Mitchell both withdrew. Keith Mitchell's another guy that I have some of. But hey, that's part of the luck of the draw. This guy does not have anybody in Mexico. This guy's got 1 guy in Mexico. So you can see the value comes in having your golfers play, especially these events like Mexico Open where there's lots of birdies to be had. But yeah, so we're currently sweating these out. And then in the lobby, if we go to PGA, we have the Scramble Returns. So the Scramble Returns is the same type of contest as the original Scramble, but it starts with the Masters. Same thing, 6-person drafts, 1 out of 6 advance. Then you go on to the second round where 1 out of 12 advance. And then there's a 390-seat final. So even a little bit more extreme than the original Scramble, but similar types of strategy applies in terms of wanting to balance out your teams, in terms of wanting to make sure that you have a golfer 6 as close to 6 as possible playing in every event. So yeah, I am 130 lineups into the Scramble Returns, which means I have 20 more remaining. And my plan is to come back and do some drafts for the Scramble Returns live on here on this very channel. We're not going to do a Scramble Returns draft today. I wanted this to kind of be a more evergreen piece of content to talk about the strategy elements. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful and you learned something. And it's a really fun contest. Really fun contest. If anyone is out there and looking to get into it, feel free to reach out to me, to DM. I went back and forth on whether or not I wanted to make videos on this because I do think the edge is truly that massive and that important, but it's fun. I'd rather bring people along the journey and hopefully we can all sweat some winning teams together. Thanks for giving this a listen, and we'll be back for some Scramble Returns drafts in the near future. See ya.